I overcome the global intimacy disorder by actually accessing gnosis, knowledge, wisdom, right? Direct realization from deep study of third person, right? So I want to study, and I want to study, right, nature with profound depth. I want to understand the chlorophyll molecule and be blown away by the process of photosynthesis. And I want to actually not just look at the beauty of a baby, I want to look at and understand mitosis and meiosis. At the same time, I don't want to just study mitosis and meiosis. I want to hold the baby in my arms, second person, who emerges, the baby emerges from mitosis and meiosis, right? Right. And then I want to actually be able to experience the inner child that lives in me, first person. It's always, you need all three. When you pick one and you basically alienate from the other two, that's an expression of the global intimacy disorder. It's so insanely good to be here together in a place of depth and a place of commitment. And we're going to do part two. It's a hugely important conversation we're about to have. And it's one that we've never had. It's in a certain sense part two of last week, but if you weren't here last week, that's totally fine. Let me just get a sense in the chat box. All right. How many people were not here last week? So we'll try and do it in a way where we can kind of find our way. We'll do kind of a part two, but we'll recapitulate at least some of part one in light of what Christina Amelon already recapitulated. Take a look on Substack and Medium, right? Take a look in Substack and Medium. And Elena did a fantastic recapitulation as well. Or it's not really a recapitulation, that's what Haley's doing orally, but a kind of, artistic, edited, rendition of the oral essay of last week, right? So take a look at that. It's actually important. So I want to try and find my way into how we can get here. Okay. So welcome. We start here. So we're in one mountain. We're in one mountain, many paths. This is week 400 and something, 20. One mountain, I had the privilege of starting with my very, very dear friend, Barbara Marks Hubbard. And we started one mountain in order to respond to the metacrisis, in order to respond to existential risk, on the one hand. On the other hand, we started one mountain in order to enact a kind of evolutionary church, right? In order to enact an evolutionary mosque, an evolutionary synagogue, an evolutionary Buddhist dojo, an evolutionary secular humanist center, right? An evolutionary scientific vision, right? We try to, what is the best enactment of being a human being in this lifetime? Right? What does it mean in this lifetime to be a human being? And to be able to come to the moment of my death without fear, because I've actually lived my life well. And that this lifetime becomes the ground for the next lifetime. It becomes the launching pad for the next lifetime, right? That we actually set course for a deep transformation that takes place within the unique quality of my being, the unique quality of infinity that is garbed in my unique finitude. So what does it mean to live fully and ethically and filled with Eros and alive and incarnating goodness and truth and beauty? So even if there was no metacrisis, we'd want to evolve religion and evolve spirit and evolve science and take them out of their partial insights and their partial intuitions, parts that for most systems claim to be wholes, and then wind up distorting the field. How do we take the true but partial insights and then weave them together in a larger whole, which itself is the evolution of consciousness? That is the evolution of culture and consciousness, which is the evolution of love. So that would be urgent by itself, but then that urgency is then fed through this prism of amplitude, right? It's exponentially amplified because we're in a generation in which all civilizations have failed. We've solved none of the core risks that cause them to fail. And I often refer to Tainter's book on the rise and fall of civilizations, Joseph Tainter's book, which among other works discusses this in some depth. So we have now a global civilization, none of the old problems solved, with exponential power and the capacity, not through a nuclear bomb that requires state capacities, but through rogue actors to literally destroy the entire thing. And rogue actors are much more likely because we don't have a shared story. We're not intimate with each other. We're not family to each other. We're not evolutionary family. There's actually a global intimacy disorder. We're not in a shared story of value. And so we've identified the root cause of this metacrisis as being the failure to overcome the global intimacy disorder, which at its core is based on the failure to articulate a vision that value is real, and based on the vision that value is real, to take the true but partial insights of the different systems and weave them together in the larger whole, which would be a valid story, right? A story of value rooted in not contrivances, not fictions, but rooted in first principles and first values, in evolving first principles and first values that become a shared grammar of value that creates intimacy between us, that allows us, right, to both live fully and alive and radically and liberate ourselves from the brokenness, or turn the brokenness into part of the wholeness, and at the same time respond to the metacrisis. And this week, uniquely, I'm going to ask Lena to include this part. Right, we're not going to edit this part out this week because we actually need this context, and I think I think we stated it in a way that's at least helpful to me. Okay, so now, are we ready? Are we ready to go in? Okay, so now we're going to go into what we're going to do now is we want to go into a very, very unique dimension of what we need in order to overcome the global intimacy disorder and to enact this new story of value that will allow for global intimacy and therefore global resonance and therefore global coherence and therefore global coordination in response to global existential challenges. So are we ready to play a larger game? Are we ready? 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 Let's do this. Let's do this. Are we ready to participate in the evolution of love? And this is like we're doing this for the first time. It's always for the first time. Madonna got some things wrong. She got some things right, like a virgin. For the very first time, we re-virginate. We step in again. Now we're going to add. We're going to make love in a new way. We're going to enact in a new way. We're going to articulate in a new way. We're going to be serious in a new way, right? So on the one hand, it's radically new. On the other hand, right, we're bringing with us everything from all the different places we've been engaged in this revolution, in this response to the metacrisis, but we want to add something new that's never been here before. Okay, something radically new. So we want to be both virgins. We want to re-virginate, if you will. We want to be alive for the very first time. And always, by the way, the nature of being a sage, and we need to be a sage together, is we get excited again. It's for the very first time. Even as we deepen, we say things that are actually radically new, but they build on, they take with them, they draw from everything that came before. Okay, so here we go. Here we go. So we're talking about channeling. And I got a bunch of emails from different people in our circle, fantastic people saying, why are you talking about channeling? This is like the serious Da Vinci, new story of value, first philosophy, world philosophy revolution. Why are you talking about channeling? This is a serious place. And that's what we began to address last week. And one of the things we began to address was why channeling, the first person voice of channeling, like all the other voices, needs to be part of the story. So that's point one. Point two, here we go. Because to take channeling out of the story would itself be an expression of the global intimacy disorder. And in our book, which is around here someplace, God knows where's that book? I don't know where it is. Oh, here it is. Yes. First principles and first values, right? And oh my God, Krista, I don't know how many reviews we have, but we said we're going to get to 100 by Christmas. So if you have not reviewed this book, a deep personal ask, please review it. It actually makes a difference. We actually need 100 reviews to be able to put this book into culture. Okay. So that's like big thank you. Okay, here we go. So we're grounding. So in this book, we talk about the global intimacy disorder, which I just described a couple of minutes ago. And we give 13 expressions of the global intimacy disorder. Okay. One of them is the lack of intimacy between different modes of knowing. Remember that one? Incredibly important. In other words, one mode of knowing tries to colonize the world of gnosis, right? And then everything else is left out. So there's third person knowing, that which I know in third person. And third person would be, what's an example of third person? Anyone? So Dharma, kind of the laws of the universe, as it were. And that's, in other words, a vision of first principles and first values backed by the universe, which is a new vision that we're calling the new story of value, which is cosmorotic humanism. That is a third person story. We're telling a story, the story itself, which is a story backed by the universe, right? So in that sense, we're calling it Dharma. And by Dharma, we mean something about the true nature of reality that we can know, which, by the way, doesn't remove uncertainty. It doesn't remove mystery. Part of the nature of reality is mystery and uncertainty. So it's not a fundamentalist claim of certainty that is alienated from uncertainty. Actually, mystery and revelation, certainty and uncertainty dance together. And that itself is one of the core features of this new story of value. But the new story of value, that's third person. Does that make sense to everyone? Everybody? Good? Third person? Are we good on third person? Just give me a yes so we know we're okay. Anybody? Give me a yes. Okay, we're good? Okay. Second person is the space between us. The space between us. We're in conversation, the space between us. Okay? It's community. It's communion. It's the yearning, the allurement towards the larger whole and being part of the larger whole, but it's specifically the relationship between parts, the space in between, right? So, for example, one of the weaknesses of the way, let's say, my dear friend Ken Wilber's integral theory is described as, it talks about reality as 4 quadrants. And the 4 quadrants are, borrowed and expanded from Habermas's 3 life worlds. And it's essentially I, the interior of the I, right? And then there is we, and then there's it. So it is third person. Now, it doesn't mean it's dead. Does everyone get? It doesn't mean it's dead. It's not an it in the sense of it being dead. It means we're looking at it. It's third person, right? Second person is, right, we. It's the space in between. So in the quadrants, you've got first person, so the first person of the individual, or the interior space of the individual, right? Then you have the interior space of culture, which is we. All right, does that make sense to everybody? So you've got I, they call it the upper left quadrant. And then you have the lower left quadrant, which is we, the interior space of culture. Then you have the right-handed quadrants, right? This is easy to follow. And this is basically just, again, Habermas recapitulated, but in a way in which Ken added some really important things. But you've got on the right side, you've got the exterior of the individual. So it's the exterior form of the individual, the objective dimension, not the interior. And then you have the exterior of culture. So the exterior of the individual might be, did you take your vitamins? The kind of physicality of your individual body. And the exterior of the community is, let's say, the form of government. Does that make sense? What form of government do we have? What form of healthcare do we have? Those are exterior structures. Does everyone get that? Everybody get that? Okay. Now, but don't go too far into it. Now, my point is not to go. My point is that actually the key is not Habermas's 3 life worlds, I, we, and it. And to stay close, it's the space between them. Does everybody get that? It's how they play with each other. So whether you're talking about Habermas's 3 life worlds, I, we, and it, or Integral's slight expansion of it, because it talks about the I of the individual and the I of the community, right? The interior of the individual, the interior of the I and the interior of the we, right? but it doesn't matter whether they're talking about 4 quadrants or 3 life worlds, right? The key is not each one individually. The key is the space between them. That's the point. That, right? The play is in the space between. So the space between is second person. It's how 2 parts relate to each other. It's the nexus point. Okay, the nexus point is, right, that's where the play happens, right? It's the space in between. So the voice of God appears, right, in the classical lineage tradition of Solomon's temple above the Ark of the Covenant, which became famous in Harrison Ford movies, at the Ark of the Covenant, Temple of Doom. So above the Ark of the Covenant are 2 cherubs. The 2 cherubs are romantically entwined. They're essentially entwined. And from that space in between, second person, cherubs are facing each other, making love. From the space in between, the voice emerges. So it's what emerges from the in-between, that's second person. Does everybody get that? That's second person. And then first person is, right, what each of the cherub feels moving through them as they're making love. That's first person. Or first person is the channel, which we talked about last week. Moses takes dictation. He's channeling the divine. And as we said last week, it's not that Moses is out of the way, but it's that Moses is so fully present that he's channeling the divine. That's one kind of channel. And there's also a second kind of channel where actually I do get somewhat out of the way, and a voice or kind of guides, as it were, entities move through me, but those entities are never separate from me. It's not actually that there's this other entity that's completely separate. There's actually voices that access and move through me, but those voices in some sense are also not just using me as a vessel, right? But I'm actually in some way or another, right, part of the transmission. But in an ultimate transmission, there's a complete merger between my essence and the voice of the guides, or the voice of the first person channeling. So Moses channels the Torah. Okay, fair? So far, are we good, everybody? We good? So the voice of channeling is actually an important voice. The voice of channeling is the first person experience. And what we've done in a global intimacy disorder is we've said, oh, possibility 1, we're third person people. So third person would be what? Science. Third person. The old dharmas of the great religions, the old religious systems, also often third person. Even the new story of cosmologic humanism is third person, but as we'll see in this new story of cosmologic humanism, this new story of value in response to the metacrisis, we're going to have first, second, and third person. But the story that we're telling, the telling of the story is third person. Okay? But what happens is often the third person people, the science people, the religion people, or people, they're telling they're news story people. Let's say they're not even doing a news story of value. They're just, we're telling a news story. Okay? So what becomes central is the religion, the science, or the news story. So that's the third person tale, but actually they disqualify or dissociate from the second person and the first person, right? So as we're doing third person, we don't really do second person, right? Second person, right, often is, I'll give you an example of second person. So second person we've just talked about, right, the space in between. So let's say in classical culture, second person becomes romance. Romance is a major, right? Second person, just, it's you and me. It's you and me, baby. Second person, which is beautiful, but second person also can hijack culture. It's all about an individual, 2 separate selves being in separate person, and there is no dharma. There's just what's happening between us right now. There is no tradition. There is no science. There is no interior sciences, just second person. Or the church might be second person. The church community or the synagogue community or the mosque community or the Buddhist community, it's the community that matters, right? But it's second person, right? But then the shadow of the community is it obliterates first person and obliterates third person. So that the church is not looking at science in any real way. And it dismisses first person as being ridiculous. We don't want, right? Unless it's a fundamentalist church, which talks in tongues, And even then, the first person of talking in tongues is hijacked by the second person. So fundamentalist communities or cults, right? Or the cult of romance. Did everyone get all three of those? Fundamentalist communities or pre-personal cults or the cult of romance, right? The religion of romance, all prioritize second person, but don't actually really do first person. First person gets lost and third person gets lost, right? Science and the actual experience of trusting my own first person independent of the community. Okay, then first person, is everyone tracking this? Who's tracking? Just give me who's tracking. We tracking here? You get why this distinction matters, right? First person will be, I'm sitting in the meditative hall and I'm having a first person meditative experience. That's my first person. That's a first person. So meditation, thou art that, right? It's all about thou art that. It's the experience that I am having moving through me, right? That's one example of this primacy of first person. Another example of the primacy of first person is trust your feelings. That's basically one of the liberal, kind of classical liberal notions is, okay, there's no Dharma, there's no third person, so no Dharma, no church, right? First person, liberalism, trust your feelings, right? So therapy, right, is this kind of generally focused, it might try and solve problems in a family dynamic, but it's really about, let's go into your feelings. Let's go into your first person. Let's go into your experience. Now, is that good or bad? Well, there's lots of good to it, right? Actually, listening to your feelings is a big deal, right? You're getting access to your feelings is a big deal. For sure, doing therapeutic work is certainly worthwhile, important. Let's get some trauma work done. Yes, of course. And it has, just like second person and third person, has a shadow. You actually can not realize that your feelings actually might not be trustable, right? And you get that? Feelings might not be so trustable, right? I mean, maybe you're confused. Maybe the trauma is confusing your feelings. Maybe you need to let go, right? And bracket your feelings and see the broader field. Maybe your feelings are actually blocking, right? Obfuscating, right? Disintermediating between you and a direct experience of reality, right? So first person could be trust your feelings. First person could be meditation, which are all beautiful. First person could be my own creativity, the experience of my own creativity, right? And first person could be channeling, right? I'm channeling, I have a channel coming through me, and I'm trusting that channel. I'm listening to that channel, right? Does that make sense, everybody? Now, stay close. Which one of these is right? Are the first person people right? Are the second person people right? Or are the third person people right? Right, so which one of these is right? So the one of these that's right is none of them and all of them. In other words, whenever you pick first person, right, and you say that's the one, or second person, that's the one, or third person, that's the one, you get lost. Each one of those is, Gabi, is true, but deeply partial. And actually, a larger wholeness comes from the space between all of them, as all three of them kind of arise in a holy trinity. There's this holy trinity of arising, and we actually listen to all the voices, and all the voices play with each other, and all the voices dance together, and we bring these voices together. So that's what we mean by overcoming the global intimacy disorder. Does that make sense? I overcome the global intimacy disorder by actually accessing gnosis, knowledge, wisdom, right? Direct realization from deep study of third person, right? So I want to study, and I want to study, right, nature with profound depth. I want to understand the chlorophyll molecule and be blown away by the process of photosynthesis. And I want to actually not just look at the beauty of a baby, I want to look at and understand mitosis and meiosis, right, which are just so stunningly beautiful. You faint in ecstasy. Whenever I study mitosis and meiosis, which I try and do, they're inordinately complex, and I come back to them and they're dazzlingly beautiful. You can't but faint in ecstasy. Can't be but aroused into ecstasy and just faint in rapture, right? At the same time, I don't want to just study mitosis and meiosis. I want to hold a baby in my arms, second person, who emerges. The baby emerges from mitosis and meiosis, right? And then I want to actually be able to experience the inner child that lives in me, first person. You get that, right? In other words, so I can study about babies. I can hold a child, right, a baby, or I can actually access, right? My own inner child, first person, second person, and third person. It's always, you need all three. When you pick one and you basically alienate from the other two, that's an expression of the global intimacy disorder. Does that make sense, everyone? Does everyone get that? So in order to overcome the global intimacy disorder, I need to access all three voices in order to be a full human being and in order to respond to the metacrisis. Of course we need channels, right? Of course we need channels. And the world of channeling itself has kind of gotten, in some sense, self-absorbed. Often it's transmitting classical true self teachings. It often takes itself out of this larger concern for the metacrisis, this larger concern for an evolutionary dharma, right? And so those people who are channeling, they're basically channeling disincarnate entities. Right? A channel is not God. A channel is generally not channeling God. A channel is channeling generally guides that are kind of somewhere between what we would call the angelic realm and the human realm. Does that make sense? Okay. So whatever the angelic realm is, I'm not going to go into now, but there clearly are beings, right, that live in the world that are not only human, right? The reality of the world is one dimension of reality. There's an enormous amount of empirical scientific information that tells us, right? Empirical scientific information, let me be very clear of that. There's empirical scientific information that tells us that we live in a multi-dimensional world. The world is multi-dimensional. And so whatever angels are, whatever we call angels, angels are beings of another dimension. So sometimes a channel can be an angel, but usually a channel is not. Usually a channel is beings of other worlds or of other dimensions that engage this dimension. That's usually what a channel is. Now, the fact that a being comes from another dimension doesn't make it right. Can I just laugh with you for a second? It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right. And you know, a gentleman who's a wonderful gentleman who I think is a wonderful example of what a channel can be, you know, in a refined and beautiful way, Paul Selig, who I was chatting with last week, right? So, you know, Paul made the very correct remark that, you know, it would be silly to trust a disincarnate entity just because it's a disincarnate entity. Why would you trust a voice? And that's really important to get. You know, a dear friend of mine, you know, who invited me into a, you know, kind of the channel conversation, you know, said to me very, very sweetly and beautifully, he said, wow, you know, you're going to get to, you know, you're going to come down and you're going to get to talk to the angels. You're going to get to talk to the guides. And I said, only half facetiously, well, no, the angels are going to get to talk to me. The guides are going to get to talk to me. Now do you get that, my friends? I didn't mean that in a kind of arrogant way. And I was actually obviously being a little bit flip and funny, but you get the point. You get the point. The point is that, no. Actually, when we clarify our own first person as human beings, now stay close, we become first person channels. So I want to make a distinction. I want to try and make a distinction really clear. And it's very deep. So I can channel an angel. That's rare that a person channels an angel. Or I can channel a disincarnate entity of a high level, kind of a high level set of voices. And as I said, I think this, my new friend, Paul Selig, is a very refined channel and is a trustworthy channel in some deep ways, and yet in a beautiful way. I'm sharing something just beautiful, as we met and we engaged. So, I kind of shared some Dharma, right? And, for like an hour. And then Paul shared, he accessed the guides who then loved the Dharma and commented on it and objected to certain parts of it. Right. So then I went inside and accessed the channel and I began channeling. And I responded to Paul in channeling, right, in a channeling mode of communication, and as it were, that dimension of gnosis that I was channeling talked to the dimension of gnosis, the guides that Paul was channeling. And in time, we impacted each other. right? And I would say that, I was deeply, moved and delighted and honored and learned in very real and deep ways from the guides. And I would say the guides, also in a very beautiful way, they were gorgeous. They had enormous, authenticity and humility, and they reshaped, reformulated, they were impacted, they clarified, right? And particularly, we were talking about, the nature of story. That was one of the issues, right? And we distinguished between levels of story. And I would say they were also, in a beautiful way, that's how you knew they were authentic and real and sacred. They were also impacted, and they transformed, and I'm sure will give their guidance in a different way going forward. So we impacted each other. We had a real conversation. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? Okay, now let's go deeper. Let's go deeper. So there's two ways. So when I did that channel, in response kind of to Paul's beautiful guides, so I was accessing two things. I'm going to try and give you a sense of it. So one is I was accessing what I called for that moment the Solomon guides, right? And I dropped into a channeling mode, not by any design or intention. It's just what I'd never done it in that particular way before, but just it was what was most right in the moment. It was a moment to channel the lineage guides, as it were, right? And so we did that. So that was beautiful. So that's one. Two, and here's number two. So when you channel guides and you're channeling high level voices, right? That's one dimension and mode of channeling. And when it's a channel that has integrity and depth, like Paul, it's actually a wonderful gift. And it's a gift that needs to be brought to the table. And it's a gift that needs to be part of the conversation in response to the metacrisis. So yes, I responded by channeling Solomon guides. So that was beautiful and called for. And the guides, as it were, through Paul and I had this very beautiful conversation in which we were all moved and we were all transformed. We were all different afterwards. So that's two. Okay. You with me, everybody? But I want to get to three. Here's three. But there's actually an even deeper mode of channeling. And the deeper mode of channeling is precisely what I would call unique self. Does that make sense? The deeper mode of channeling is unique self. And when you're now, I want to kind of get the sentence out, and then I want to kind of explain the sentence. So here's the sentence, right? Channeling unique self is channeling God directly. Did everyone get that sentence? When you're channeling your unique self, you're not channeling a guide, you're channeling God directly. It's a direct channel of the divine. Because that is precisely what unique self means. Now, unique self doesn't mean, if you're new, let me be clear, unique self doesn't mean your talent. It doesn't mean your personality self. It doesn't mean your separate self. It doesn't mean your small self or your ego self, whatever words we want to give. That's not what it means. That's not unique self. One, everyone with me? Two, unique self is not true self. It's not my identity with the field of the one, which is beyond all story, which is the infinity of the divine that is in this moment. And I'm part of the larger field. I'm part of the seamless code of the universe. That's true self. That's some version of true self. Okay. Unique self is not true self. It's not that either. Unique self is, I actually have done the work at separate self, the psychological work, the trauma work. I've done deep work at these kind of levels of development. I've done deep work, and Franklin Jones would call it individuation, right? And integration. I've kind of individuated, I've integrated, right? Terms that Franklin borrowed from psychology. So these kind of levels of kind of doing the work. So I've done good separate self work. I can't skip that. Then I've had a realization of my indivisibility from the larger field. I've overcome what Albert Einstein called the optical delusion of consciousness, right? I am, there was a, God, which one was it? It was one of the, if you're an Orthodox Star Wars person, you're not allowed to call something a Star Wars film, which was like an extra feature film. I think it was Rogue One. I think it was Rogue One for you Star Wars people. But there was one figure who would say, I am one with the Force and the Force is one with me. I am one with the Force and the Force is one with me. Who remembers that? Anybody remember that? Okay. Right. So that's a little bit the realization of true self. Now, this guy was killed. Okay, you can get killed being true self, to be clear, right? But true self doesn't save you from death in this world. It doesn't, right? It doesn't make this dimension an eternal dimension. But you do have this dimension of eternity that moves through you that makes you fearless. So true self is I'm one with the field. I'm part of the seamless code of the universe. True self is the singular that has no plural, right? The total number of true selves in the world is one. Okay. Then that's the God field. That's the field of Eros value. That's the field of consciousness. That's the field of inherent goodness, truth, and beauty, right? That's the field of infinity. That field, which in some sense is not the quantum foam, and it's not the 0 point field exactly. That's often misstated, right? But I would say the 0 point field in physics is a kind of poetic reflection, if you will, right? The world of physics is a world of it, right? So obviously the it world doesn't fully express, right, the biological world, right, or the cultural world, but the it world has the potentiality to birth those worlds. But the it world also emerges from an involutionary process, right? It is a contraction into a point, into an it of infinity. Infinity is disclosing itself in a grain of sand, right? Infinity is disclosing itself in the laws of physics, and the laws of physics have the infinite potential to birth, right, the world of life and the world of mind. Okay, right? So true self, that's true self. So I'm one with the divine field, and then I individuate as God having, right? Who's in the chat box now? Medea. God having a Medea experience. God having a Dorothea experience. God having a Zora experience, right? God having a Talia experience, right? Does everyone get that? God having a Krista experience, right? God having a, right? Who else here? Who else is here? And God having a Joni experience, right? God having a Timothy Paul Arya experience. God having a Cullen and Merritt experience. God having a Michael T experience, right? In other words, unique self is God is having a Terry experience. So that's channeling, right? That's what channeling means. Channeling means that the irreducibly unique voice of Terryness, when it is clarified, not because Terry disappears, but because Terry becomes the most Terry ever, like Moses becomes the channel because there's more Moses, but not because there's a separate self Moses that occludes the divine, not because there's an ego self that's torrentially, right, ignoring spirit and hijacking the space. No, the clarified Terryness, which is Eros value all the way up and all the way down. Terry is animated by an entire cellular structure that is driven by allurement and clarified allurement and desire for life, right? In which every cell knows every other cell, which emerges out of the entire field of infinite intelligence, right? Uniquely garbing itself in the finitude called Terryness, right? And infinite reality intended Terryness, and infinite reality desires Terryness, and infinite reality needs Terryness, and infinite reality recognizes the unique voice of Terryness, and infinite reality adores Terryness, and infinite reality chooses Terryness because infinite reality is choosing and intending and desiring, right, and needing and recognizing and adoring itself as Terry, because Terry as an irreducible unique self is an expression of what, right, of, right, the irreducibly unique love intelligence and love beauty that is the initiating and animating Eros and energy of all that is being Terry, with Terry's clarified unique perspective and Terry's uniquely clarified quality of intimacy, which fosters Terry's unique gift that Terry can give if he's audacious, if he takes his unique risk. Betsy, he might have to clash with you a little bit. Right? No, just kidding. Right? But another, you got to be willing to, right, take your unique risk. Step up. Be willing to, don't get conflict averse, Mark, Kathy, Terry, KK, Claire, Shahati, right? Like, let's step in, right? Do conflict with beauty, right? We don't want to be conflict averse. We want to, conflict means machloket in Hebrew. Machloket means part. Machloket means I'm taking a partial position. So I've got to take my part position and then reach together for the larger whole. And how we do conflict is the beauty of who we are. If you ever watch people making love, I don't mean actually, right? But if you kind of imagine, right, making love, the image of making love, right, is you're both conflicting and you're becoming whole at the same time. You're struggling and you're embracing. Does everyone get that? Like, oh my God. Do you get that? Like God, right? So this is this sense of becoming whole by stepping into conflict, by expressing the prophetic voice that's in my unique self while I hear your prophetic voice, but I want to demand that you clarify your voice. Now, don't come from ego. Don't come from trauma. Let's clarify our trauma. Let's clarify our ego. Let's have two prophets prophesying uniquely, and then together, their unique self instruments and the great unique self symphony of unique self creates a cacophony of sound, creates what we might call collective intelligence, collective wisdom. That's not the hive mind at all. That's totalitarian, the hive mind. The hive mind is kind of separate selves, right? Unrefined and unclarified. We're talking about a unique self symphony in which I am a reducible, unique voice of the divine. I am playing divine music, which is Terry music, which is Mark music, which is Josepha music, right? Which is Jacqueline music, which is Benjamin music, which is Shahati music, right? But I'm actually there. I'm there, like, get over the trauma. Yes, I know you got to deal with the trauma, but get out of that recursive loop. Don't use trauma as your identity. Don't use separate self breakdown, right? And don't use my pain as my identity. Stop the striving. Be in true self and realize there's no place to go. Now that I realize there's no place to go, I can now individuate as unique self and I can go everywhere, which is my unique destiny, right? And I realize every detour is part of my destination and I've got a unique voice and I'm a prophet because I am the divine voice. My unique self is a prophetic voice. My unique self is a channel. My unique self is a first person channel. My unique self is channeling not an entity, but God. And by the way, I just want to say, and I haven't checked in this with him, but I would say my friend Paul is not just channeling. He would not say this, so he has full right of denial. But I think he's not only channeling, right guides. I think actually there's this merger. It's so beautiful about Paul between Paul's irreducibly, uniquely refined self and the guides. I think they're coming together. I think it's unique self and Paul together, right? But I get to say that. That's just me. That's me. But I think there's a place in which the doubleness, the split between the channeler and the guide disappears. And then a third person emerges, what I call trialectics. I was just talking to my friend Sean literally a couple of days ago. And I think we both independently, I was unaware that he also uses the word, we both independently coined this word trialectics, meaning it's not me and it's not the guide, it's something new. It's my unique self and the guide that emerge in something new, which is a trialectical emergence. It's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. It's she comes in threes, this new voice that emerges. Does that make sense, everyone? We got this? Okay. So unique self is a channel. Unique self is a channel. We need unique self channels. We need the democratization of enlightenment. But the democratization of enlightenment is not that everyone has an experience of enlightenment in which they move beyond their story and they just live in the moment. No, mistake. No, unique, right? Enlightenment means we all live in the moment, in the infinity of the moment. In the infinity of that moment, we let go of the low-level urgency, the desperation, right, of covering over the emptiness with some kind of, contrived narrative structure, some kind of fictional story that gives me some sort of identity. I've got to always go back to true self and give up that striving. I've got to give up that kind of low-level urgency. I've got to give up that low-level desperation. I've got to just be in the moment and there's no story. That's true self. Then I individuate as unique self, and then the urgency comes back, but it's ecstatic urgency. It's the urgency of the holy and broken hallelujah. It's the re-embrace of the story, but not at the separate self level, not the victim story, but it's my unique self story. Right? It's the re-embrace of desperation. Right? There's the desperation, right, of the unique self. The unique self is desperate again. I'm desperate again. Right? It's a holy desperation. I'm filled with need again. Right? We demonize need. Need belongs to the separate self. Separate self has needs. Let's get over the need thing. Let's not be codependent. No. Codependency needs, or the demonization of codependency needs, right, is pathological versions of the separate self. Then I move to the true self. I'm just here right now. There's no place to go and nothing to do. I don't need anything. I'm just in the infinity of the now gorgeous. And then I individuate beyond true self into unique self, and now I'm filled with needs again. But these are holy needs. These are the needs of essence moving through me. This is the realization that my need is God's need, that my deepest heart's desire and need is God's deepest heart's desire and need, that I'm in need of the divine's in need of me, and I'm in need of you, and you're in need of me, and we need each other, right? And the holy realization that there's no I love you without I need you. There's no I love you without I need you. We need each other. We're afraid to need each other. We're afraid we kind of dance around. I don't need you. I'm just I don't need you. Of course we need each other, right? Of course we need each other, right? But it's not a desperate, pathetic need. It's a holy, desperate, filled with pathos, divine need that lives uniquely through me, right? Evolution is eros and action in response to need. Evolution is the very nature of evolution itself. Evolution is love in action in response to need, right? Okay, so we need to be unique selves. Does that make sense, everybody? We need to be unique selves. Is that true, everyone? We need to be unique selves. Reality needs us to be unique selves. So stay with me a second. God needs our service. Ibn Gabai, 16th century. Your deed, your unique deed, is God's need. Your unique deed is God's need. God needs my service. God needs your service. And if you don't realize that God needs your service, you have no dignity. You have no dignity. You have no dignity if you have no divinity. God needs your service, and your service is to be a unique self. And to be a unique self is to be a unique channel, a unique incarnation of the divine, a unique quality of intimacy. Because God is the infinite intimate. God's not only the infinity of power, God's the infinity of intimacy. So I'm a unique channel of the infinite intimate. I'm a unique incarnation of the infinite intimate. I'm a unique quality of intimacy. And when I clarify my unique quality of intimacy that births my unique perspective, that gives my unique gift, I am a unique force of God in the world. And before I existed, there is some sense in which that divine was not yet born into being. So I am, in my unique self, more God to come. So my dignity, right? Does everyone get this? My dignity is in my divinity, which is why flatland therapy can never work. Of course it can't work, right? You're talking to a therapist, right, who believes that the world's flatland. Very nice person, right? Sweet, lovely, him, her, she, trans, we, you, it, whatever the person is. Okay, all good, right? We're real fluid here, right? All good, right? But whoever this person is talking to, for the most part, the overwhelming majority of the therapy community believes that value is not real, right? Believes that there is no field of divinity that addresses me personally, right? That views that as fundamentalist dogma that's operating in a kind of personal psychology, right? Based on, whatever the 9 to 11 schools of psychology are, and they're supposed to make you whole. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. We can't be whole unless we restore our dignity. We can't restore our dignity unless we restore our divinity. We can't restore our divinity unless we realize that we are unique self-channels, incarnations of the infinite intimate, which is the unique quality of intimacy that lives in us, as us, and through us, that never was, is, or will be again, that is needed by the divine, that is the divine in person, that is the sudden and shocking self-recognition of the divine in us, as us, and through us. And that's where our dignity is. Our dignity is always in our divinity. My dignity is in knowing that there's more God to come, and that more God to come is me, and that I'm needed by all that is. That's what it means to be a channel. Actually, to be a human being, that's first person. Did everyone get? Let's bring it back. That's not second person. Did everyone get that? That's not third person story. It's not just story, right? It's not second person between us. It's my first person identity. My first person identity is I'm a unique channel of the divine. Now, let's go really close. So when someone, kind of from the New Age world comes to me and says, "Oh, I'm God," I say, "Shut the fuck up." Does everyone get that? No, of course you're not God. You're you. Okay, let's not get deranged here, right? We don't want to prescribe too much pharmacology. Obviously, I'm not God, I'm me. Clear? Oh, yes, but I'm also a unique self, right? When I clarify my identity, I realize my clarified identity. In my most clear moments, I actually disclose that my will is actually identical with God's will. And I'm actually a unique incarnation of the infinite divine. Hold on one second. I'm confused. How do those two go together? That's called a paradox. It's not a contradiction. It's a paradox. I'm a human being, right? You shouldn't walk around saying you're God. That's stupid. Do you get what I mean? But I want you to hear my tone. I'm being intentional, right? I'm not meaning to be facetious. And of course, you're not God. You've got a separate self, and you've got all sorts of contractions and egoic issues and unresolved shadow and psychological work and some trauma that should be worked out. And then, there's kind of that day that you did that. You remember that day? That wasn't so cool, right? So you got to get over that. You got to work on that. You've got to transform that, right? But that's all part of my humanity. About that, the psalmist said in chapter 9 of the book of Songs, Ma enosh kitiskereno. What is the human being? Such complicated mess that you're mindful of him. And then in the very next verse, the psalmist says, V'tachasreo ma'at melohim. We're but a little less than God. That's the dialectic of being a human being. That's the dialectical tension within the human charism. Right? I'm a unique self. I'm a channel of the divine. I've got to take responsibility for the God voice that moves through me. And I'm broken. So I'm a holy and a broken hallelujah. Right? Of course. So the entire goal, right, of cosmorotic humanism, of this new story of value, is to recognize that actually every human being is a channel, a clarified channel. Every human being has the potential to be a clarified channel. That's what we mean by the democratization of channeling, which is the democratization of enlightenment, which is the democratization of greatness, which is in some sense, hold on tight, the democratization of divinity, right? Consciousness is everywhere. It's everywhere. Everything, everywhere. And consciousness is the unique qualia of value. It's all value. Right? Value is not like space and time. The value is primordial. Value is the field in which space and time and all of the manifest arises. Okay? So, wow. Okay, we're going to conclude with the code. Okay, I'm going to ask Terry to kind of read the code. I'm just going to say a one word afterwards, and then we're going to turn to Krista. Okay, wow. So Terry's going to read the code, which will kind of hold this whole vision, hold this whole picture. So I turn to Terry.
So, code. In this time between worlds and time between stories, we need all voices at the table to respond to the metacrisis. That means the first person of spirit, the second person of spirit, and the third person of spirit. We have excluded the first person voices from the metacrisis conversations. Those voices need to be invited, included, and embraced with discernment and distinction. We must reclaim the enchanted universe in order to respond to the metacrisis. The enchanted universe includes sages, scientists, and seers, politicians and poets, entrepreneurs, and ecstatics. All voices from all tables demand clarification and depth, but we cannot afford to exclude any forces, nor do we want to. For indeed, the exclusion of voices is itself one of the root causes for the metacrisis.
Wow. Beautiful. Terry, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And yeah, wow. Wow. Okay, so does everyone have patience for let me just check one thing here. Okay, patience just for 1 minute. We're gonna close in 1 minute. Just a couple of things. First, I want to just do a vote. Thank you, Terry, so much. So next week, so Taheli, thank you beautifully for laying out next week. Krista, thank you so much for creating this all together with us. So next week, we're going to be doing this kind of full day, and I feel a kind of a moral, ethical responsibility. I've thought about this a lot more, even in the last week, to kind of respond to this book Nexus, which is part of this body of work, which is kind of a naive voice of postmodernity that's been accepted as kind of given and true by, certainly 50 million people who bought the books, and by the kind of legacy institutions represented by the endorsers of the books. And I think the books are literally an essential part of the metacrisis itself. I would say the books themselves are, written by Yuval Harari, are not him personally, right? He's invited for dinner, blessings to Yuval, but right, the ideas they express that are being fundamentally missed, right, are the metacrisis. They are the root cause of the metacrisis, the breakdown, right, of reality at its core, and they are literally chilling reality in a fundamental way. And I actually just can't look away. I feel like a deep, need, desire, right, obligation to respond. We've done 4 One Mountains on this. We did, Scott, good to see you, Scott, man. We did a couple of courses with our friends at Parallax on this on the Eye of Value. But I want to do it in a much more, in a deeper way, as it were. I actually want to kind of open the texts with you, go inside, right? And look at, look at this voice, right? And of course, there are prophets and there are false prophets, right? And there are false prophets who are bad guys and false prophets who are just, confused or dogmatic. So just like there were false prophets of the old religions, there's false prophets of scientism, at the dogmas of scientism. Okay. So, So I think we have no choice but to take this on, but we're going to do it in a way that's so respectful, because, I would die for Yuval's right to write those books. Does everyone get that? Even if I think he's having a massively chilling and massively destructive effect, right, on the entire fabric of world culture, doesn't matter, right? There's an inherent value, which is his freedom to write those books. I honor that value of freedom, and I would protect it, right, with everything. Okay, so you get that? We're going to actually model, how do we actually have this conversation? So we're going to start at 8. We're going to go till, about 12:30. And then we're going to have One Mountain at, 1. Now, so I assume that most people aren't going to be coming, right, to the long all day. I get that's too much for everyone, but if you're brave and audacious, totally come. It's going to be a once in a lifetime dive, or just not available anyplace, in how to read texts of culture. How do you do that? How do you read texts of culture? And I would say, I don't listen to podcasts. I mean, virtually never. Haley send me a couple of podcasts of Harari's. And I was in a dark car with my son Zion and beloved KK. And so I listened to some of them, and literally the interviewers, all well-known figures, they didn't have a clue what he was talking about. And that's been true for, since he published Sapiens, I think in 2014 or something like that. And it's, so we're going to actually work through the text. I'm going to be kind of moving around. I'm going to read a passage and say, okay, let's look at this passage. What does it mean? What's the implication? Where's it going? Okay. Right. And how do we actually, respond powerfully and beautifully, and actually explode, right, the set of essentially dogmatic assumptions, the same way we had to explode the dogmatic fundamentalism of the old religions. Okay. We've got to explode the dogmatic fundamentalism of this kind of work, which is at the very center of culture today. I mean, it's all over the place. So I feel like we have to do that, and we have to do it more methodically. Does that make sense? Everyone get what I'm saying? That word, more methodically, than we did it in kind of the 4 One Mountains and in the Eye of Value course, just kind of step by step. So we're going to do that. We're going to record it. We're actually, Eli, I think, our new friend from New Hampshire, is going to come here. We're going to record it so we have it. And we'll create a little, Zach and I have been talking about this, incessantly. So I'm going to speak for David J. Temple, right, which is myself and Zach Stein and Ken Wilber. We've talked about these issues in some length. So I'm going to kind of speak, as it were, as David J. Temple, right? And we'll try and then express this, as David J. Temple, and put it into the world. So that's up in a big way. So what I'm thinking is, though, that in One Mountain, we're going to do regular One Mountain. And I want to do the final week on channeling. I'm going to do one more week on channeling. That makes my day a little harder because I've got to switch between topics. But I think we should keep, does everyone agree with that? I'm kind of checking in public. I think we should keep the integrity and the flow of One Mountain and not lose it. So we'll do, does that make sense, everybody? Let's keep, so we're going to do regular One Mountain. Okay, regular One Mountain. Okay, does that make sense? So regular One Mountain, 1 to 2. Okay, good. So 2 more little things, and I will be quiet, promise. But 1, I am starting, I think, on November 14th, a once a month group Holy of Holies. So it's a group session, right? Suzette and Krista and Sabri, right, will be involved. Suzette's holding it. Krista and Sabri will be involved in holding it. I'll be doing it once a month, and then there'll be a, kind of another week, which is a discussion afterwards. And I'm going to be doing in that only sacred texts. I'm going to actually be reading texts. I'm going to be reading, texts from Buddhism, texts from the Hebrew wisdom lineage, Aramaic texts, Kashmir Shiva texts. I'm going to be reading primary texts. Okay, that's what it's going to be about. Okay, so it's sacred text study. That's what it is. It's kind of group Holy of Holies, sacred text study. So that's one. Two, starting what week? Anybody tell me? I think November 20 something. Maybe it'll appear on the November 24th, right? I'm going to start. I haven't given a kind of new unique self teaching in a long time. If I can just explain it just for 10 seconds, we wrote the unique self book, was written in 2011 and was based on kind of the previous 20 years of teaching. I started teaching kind of unique self material when I was 25. Don't do the math. So and the unique self book is kind of a critical piece of Homo Amor, of this vision of the new human and the new humanity. So between 2011 and now, an enormous amount of unfolding has taken place in the unique self teaching. And Claire Millionaire, who founded To Me Together, and we're co-directors of the Unique Self Institute, right? We'll be hosting this course. We'll be hosting it together with Parallax. And I'm going to do, I think, 4 of them this year, right? In the style that my dear friend Sally Kempton, who's passed, used to do. So it's going to be 3 weeks at a time. And we're just going to take one new topic in the unique self Dharma that's not in the unique self books. Does everyone get that? That's not in the unique self books. It will not be in the books, right? Or there'll be just like a quick allusion to it. And we're going to actually try and just get a basic sense of that topic. Okay. And then we're going to, as we go, put out, kind of the material gradually, so that we're going to do this for, God willing, we should be alive and well and healthy. We're going to do this actually for the next several years. That's our intention, right? Maybe next 2-3 years, right? Until we get it done. Right? Until we get it done, we'll figure out, maybe at some point we'll say, wow, this is taking too long. We'll do like 2 full days or something. But for now, every kind of 3 months, we're going to do a 3-week course, right? It will always be, I think, on what day? I think it's always going to be, what day is it always going to be? It's always going to be on Sunday. I think it's always going to be Sunday right after One Mountain. It's always going to be Sunday right after One Mountain at 2:00. Okay. Wow. Jaw. Right. Okay. So for anyone who's having dentistry issues, like mad, crazy blessing, right? For anyone who's having, other kind of life challenge, physical issues, for you or someone close to you, mad, crazy, crazy blessing. Mad, crazy blessing for the horror of the Arab community in Gaza, in which many, many, many tragic, innocent people have been killed in the last, period of time. And mad blessings to every man, woman, and child in Gaza. Mad blessings to Israel, right? And the impossibility of responding to Hamas and to 9/11. And as I promised a long talk about that, and we'll have it. But right now we're just madly blessing everyone and just sending love. And, as I've shared with you all, and I'm just going to share with, one last time now, I have 2 threads on my phone. And one is an Arab thread and one is an Israeli thread. And I get constant, on my everyday of, faces of people who've been killed, boys, 18-year-olds who we call soldiers, right? There's not a moral equivalence here. And there's tragedy all around and pain all around. Like, oh my God. So I just kind of live that every day. I'm deeply involved in it. Mad blessings to the Sudan, and mad blessings to the Ukraine, and mad blessings to the Congo, right? I mean, there's so much pain in the world, and there's so much beauty, right? So we need to do this. We need a coherent story that can become a shared story of value. I am 1,000,000,000% convinced it's not the only thing that should be done, but I do think that without it, we have no chance, either in response to the metacrisis or for the day after, right? Some version of some various forms of collapse. We need these codes, and they're not happening everywhere. So we have, and there's lots of people doing really important work, but this is crazy important. And it's in the space between us here in One Mountain. This is where we decided to articulate this. we decided, Barbara and myself and all of us, not to articulate it in a university department, and not to articulate it in a department of religion or philosophy someplace, or in a church or in a synagogue. We said, let's do this here together. I think that's right. I think that's good. And I am just on my knees. I am so madly appreciative of everyone. And just one last thing. This coming April 28th, myself, Aubrey Marcus, Christina Kincaid, right? Shahati is holding the space. Krista is holding the music, but and Krista did a gorgeous job last year, kind of holding the entire festival mystery school. Krista's now kind of weaving the magic of the Great Library this year. Shad has stepped in, right, to kind of hold the mystery school. This is our 12th mystery school. Shad's already held 10 of them, some of them with Claire. This is the first, this is the first mystery school that Aubrey is joining us. Aubrey's been in the lineage deeply, and we've done like 100 Holy of Holies in the last, year. Vailana will be there, Vailana Marcus, and Keiki will be doing, stunning work. Claire will be there, right? All of us will, let's all be there together. Right? It's a crazy, unique opportunity. It is, for me, madly exhausting, but I think it's worthwhile to be in the same space, to be together, to see each other face to face, right? To kind of to be there. And so there will be, I think, we're doing a big conversation about this next week, but everyone should get an opportunity to register now. There's kind of what do they call it? Early bird pricing. I don't even know why they call things early bird. Are birds early? I don't know. Something about birds being early, or early birds are, I don't even know what this has to do with birds, but whatever that is. Oh my God. Cha.